Do you have anything to say to everybody before we get to questions, or?
No, thanks for everybody for praying. Man, God's been good. I feel great other than this crazy cough. I can't seem to shake it 5 months now, so pray for that. And so pray that God will get the glory, that's all. Okay?
Okay. This is from Michael. I recently discovered an evangelical minister on YouTube and really enjoy watching his debates, his teaching, apologetics. He reaches out to Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, atheists, etc. He recently posted a topical video on YouTube where he says he doesn't believe in teachings of post-trib. One of the many verses he uses to support this is Matthew 24:34. Can you please explain what Jesus meant in Matthew 24:34, and what are your thoughts on post-millennialism?
Well, if you read the verses right before Matthew 24:34, in Matthew 24, the whole first 30 verses, Jesus was answering their question. They said at the beginning of the chapter, Lord, when are you coming, and what sign do we watch for? And he explained all about the troubles and trials and tribulation. And then he said, the sun and the moon go dark. That's in verse 29. And then the Son of Man comes and gathers his elect. The rapture takes place after the sun and the moon go dark. And the sun and the moon go dark before the day of the Lord. It says in Acts chapter 2 and Joel chapter 2. So I cover all that in my book, What on Earth is About to Happen. It could not be more clear that the sun and the moon go dark is the sign to watch for. That's mentioned 10 times in the Bible. It's in Isaiah 13:10 the first time, and then Isaiah, I think, 24. And then once in Ezekiel, 3 times in Joel. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Revelation 6, verse 12. That's the ones I can do off the top of my head. So there are, that's the sign. So it couldn't be more clear that the Lord comes back after the tribulation, before the day of the Lord. And the wrath of God is what falls in the day of the Lord. And people have confused tribulation with wrath. They are not the same. Tribulation is what the world does to us, and Jesus said, you will have it. John 16:2, in the world ye shall have tribulation. That is not the same as wrath, which is what God does to the world. My children are not appointed unto wrath, 1 Thessalonians 1:10 and 5:9. So if you rightly divide the word of truth, it is real obvious that the sequence is 7-year period, the last half of which is called tribulation. Then the rapture, then the day of the Lord starts, which has 2 distinct parts. The day of the Lord has a time of wrath for about 3 years, and then a time of blessing for about 1,000 years. I'm embarrassed. It took me 40 years to see it, but that is clearly what the Bible says. I would encourage them to read my book, What on Earth is About to Happen, where I have that all spelled out. As far as in verse 34 of Matthew 25, I don't have my Bible here, but that's talking about the fig tree. The fig tree is mentioned in all 3 passages, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, about the... But that's after the rapture has already taken place. The rapture takes place, it says very clearly, he blows a trumpet, sends the angels, they gather together his elect from all over the world and takes them to the uttermost part of heaven. So I think to jump to verse 34 and miss the first 33 verses is a serious mistake. Okay?
Okay, great. This is from, okay, that was Michael. This is from C. We're continuing to pray for you, and we hope you get out soon. I've always been curious about the idea of the concept of an ice age. I know you teach this in one of your seminars. Could you help me by explaining where this fits into Earth's history?
Well, there are, among the creationists, young Earth creationists, actually 6,000 is not young, but that's compared to billions is young. The Ice Age there'd be 2 options basically that they teach. One is that the Ice Age caused the flood, and the other is that the flood caused the Ice Age. I tend to be in the camp that the Ice Age started at the beginning of the flood, possibly if there was a canopy of ice above the atmosphere, which I believe there was, If you read Genesis 1, verse 6 and 7, there was water above the firmament. And verse 20 tells us the firmament is where the birds fly. And 2 Peter says God made the earth in the water and out of the water. So when God first made the earth, I don't think there's any question, at least in my mind there isn't. Now some creationists don't teach this, and I think they're wrong. But there was a canopy of ice around the world like a big greenhouse or terrarium, probably 10 miles up, where it's 100 below zero right now, over your head. The Jews have always taught it was a crystalline canopy. If you read Josephus' book, they said it was three fingers thick, so let's say 2.5 inches of solid ice. Carl Baugh in Glen Rose, Texas, has a great visuals and stuff like that on this, what's called the canopy theory. If the fountains of the deep broke open first, which is what the Bible says happened, the stuff would shoot up and hit this crystalline canopy and shatter it. And because super cold ice is magnetic, the ice would tend to be sucked in around the poles. So you would get a rapid dump of super cold ice at the North and South Pole, causing an instant ice age, burying animals standing up. So the ice, in my seminar, I cover how it may have been an ice meteor from outer space, and that is certainly an option. But it's probably even more likely that it was simply the ice that used to protect the world is now becoming dumped on the poles, and it would spread out rapidly down clear to Kansas City, Missouri, carving out all kinds of glacial effects like kettle lakes and drumlins and moraines, and all the ice age effects are pretty obvious. But I think that could have happened very rapidly at the beginning of the flood. Of course, now the flood would cover the world with water, but ice and water meet all the time, and it takes years for them to melt. Icebergs can go 4 or 5 years. So there would have been earth covered in water, some of it liquid, some of it solid, while Noah's floating around. And the ice, if it pushed down to Kansas City, and then the earth is flooded, if the ice is thick enough, like at the South Pole, it just simply presses all the way to the bottom, to the rock, and the water can't get under it. So I would tend to think that probably the ice age began at the beginning of the flood and probably lasted for a few hundred years after the flood as that massive amount of ice slowly melted back to its current location. Okay, does that answer it?
Mm-hmm. How does a hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber help the body heal?
I'm sorry, try that again. I was busy coughing here. How would the hyperbaric what now?
Okay. How does a hyperbaric oxygen...
From the Saratoga County Sheriff's Office.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber help the body heal?
Well, the body needs oxygen for almost all healing processes. Some things happen in your body that are called anaerobic and have to happen in the lack of oxygen, but nearly everything else has to have oxygen. And so increasing air pressure with increased oxygen forces more oxygen into the tissues and through the capillaries and into every cell. There's plenty on the internet about hyperbaric, H-Y-P-E-R, just means high pressure, baric like barometric. So hyperbaric is high pressure. A lot of sports teams have their own hyperbaric chamber, and if a guy gets injured, they stick him in there for an hour a day or twice a day, and they heal up twice as fast. A lot of hospitals have hyperbaric chambers, and I'm sure in the 8.5 years I've been in prison, there's been plenty of research done to find even more uses of it. But gangrene, wound care, it's kind of expensive to run a chamber, but the healing is incredible. I've been in one 3 times. A friend of mine has one in Oregon, and he let me go in. They call it a dive, like you're scuba diving, but actually you don't go anywhere. They just pressurize it, the equivalent of diving down to a certain number of feet of underwater. So we dove down to about 90 feet, they called it. I think that's about triple normal pressure. And after an hour in there, I felt like running.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
It was great. It was kind of weird. It was like, whoa. And that was just 1 or 2 treatments. And then, so prolonged exposure to hyperbaric. And it gets dangerous if you get too much oxygen. But I'm sure God had it all figured out where they had, say, 30% oxygen instead of 21 and 1.5 atmospheres. I don't know. But Adam and Eve lived to be 900. So, all right, we got lunch here, brother. Let me call you later on this afternoon, okay?
No problem.
Oh, yeah, gather all the questions together, and this is fun for me. Thank you.
Will do. Okay, bye.